Hello, and welcome back again to another episode of Best Friends Dissimilar Interests. My name is Tiberi.
And I'm Matt.
And this is a TV show. This is a podcast where two friends share all of their interests to one another, knowing full damn well they've probably never seen it, because over 15 years of friendship, they've had almost no interest in common. So this week I had Matt watch Maquia, When the Promised Flower Blooms, which is an anime movie.
Yeah, it was definitely, because you've had me watch a little bit of anime now, and it was definitely unlike the other anime in a lot of ways, so that was interesting.
Yeah, so I would definitely say this one, from a general art and character design style, is a little more anime coded, if that makes sense. Definitely with Mononoke and Princess Mononoke, they have their own kind of unique styles, especially Ghibli has its own kind of textbook style, which you're going to see in their other movies. But this one definitely is a little bit more, I don't want to say commercialized, because it's not, but it's definitely a more unique take as well. It's definitely not like what you see in a lot of the crazy shonen that we're not going to touch because they're just dog shit. But it's definitely not as out there as Mononoke, you know?
Yeah, and okay, I know what shonen is. What was the name of the genre in which Mononoke falls within?
I would say that seinen is really more so for adults in the genre. I wouldn't say this typically falls into a shonen or seinen per se. So seinen being for adults and shonen being for the younger audiences. A lot of time being kind of the male ones like Naruto and One Piece and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I knew that this I knew it wasn't shonen. I knew it probably wasn't considered seinen. So what would it be considered?
Honestly, with a movie like this, I would just call it an adventure, kind of, how do I say? I would just say it's an adventure drama, is all I would really call it. I don't really think it'd be a secondary format, you know?
Oh, okay. So I didn't know if there was because I don't fully understand how the genres within anime work. It definitely seems like it is, what we've gone over. It seems like, okay, this is something that would appeal to this demographic, and that's kind of how they break it up. So I didn't know if this was a similar kind of thing.
I don't think so. There are a lot of kind of more emotionally in tune movies kind of like this coming out in that kind of anime sphere, one of which is Suzume. We might cover that here on this podcast. It's a great one. I enjoy it, but I think it's a little bit more kind of personally toned and when it comes to emotion and kind of human interaction, as opposed to kind of the big dumb fights like you'll see in Naruto a lot of times. So it just hits a little different.
Okay. Well, yeah, that was my first question, was just, what category is this in? So that's interesting that maybe it would be considered maybe a genre I may be more familiar with, like a drama.
Yeah. I don't really think that the structure of this movie is really anything of huge note. It's just kind of the narrative it talks. Now, we keep talking about the movie, but I haven't really talked about what it is yet. So, Maquia, When the Promised Flower Blooms, is a 2018 anime movie that was produced by the studio PA Works. So this is, like I said, one of the most emotional anime movies we're going to see out there. Kind of characterized a lot with just kind of, as you saw, a lot of the emotional kind of interactions between Maquia and the people around her. But a lot of people will kind of compare this to Ghibli in the way that it's kind of these sprawling landscapes in this fantasy world, and kind of these really picturesque, 3 or 4 shot vistas of these places.
Yeah, I could see that. And also the soundtrack reminded me of Princess Mononoke.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it definitely goes a little bit more, like I said, for the whimsical side of things as it does the serious side of things in a lot of ways, even though it's dealing with probably, more serious emotions. But yeah, there isn't too much about the movie itself, I would say, noteworthy as far as the research goes. But basically the overall premise, as you watched, was the Iorf people, who are able to live hundreds and hundreds of years. They're living in peace in this private village, and humans show up and pretty much crash the party. And then the whole story kind of starts from there. We follow this young girl named Maquia and her adventures. Kind of as she escapes this capture from the humans, escapes this kind of almost this kind of slaughter of sorts, and kind of finds her way through the world as she's, kind of very slowly aging and relevance to everyone around her. So the movie's very much kind of centered around her and a young boy she finds. But I will let Matt get into that more here in a moment. But yeah, okay. So any other questions, Matt, before we kind of dive into this and talk about it?
No. Like I said before we started recording, I'm definitely going to need... I just watched it today, but I'm still going to need reminders about what exactly happens when, just because it is a story stretched across decades. So I'm like, okay, this happened and this happened, so I'm going to need help with that for sure.
And something, too, and I'm going to say this before we get too far into the movie, definitely, like, a lot of the... I think there's a really interesting overall world. Like, it kind of hints at these, magical beings. It kind of hints at this really kind of whimsical, overarching kind of planet that they live on. I think it's even stated at one point that, like, a big part of this world is kind of the passing on of these kind of latent magical entities, the Iorf being one of them. It says that they're kind of fated to kind of fade away in the annals of history when the humans are going to kind of just take over everything. And so we hear about all of these previous, like, generations of magical, like, leviathans who acted like shipping, companies and basically just took the shit all around the world. And all that shit's kind of dying. And so, yeah, Maquia is kind of forced to figure out what to do with all that in mind.
Yeah, and it's very Lord of the Rings in that way. Because, that's a big theme in that is the world is becoming industrialized and all these magical beings and magic and all this stuff is fading away and leaving the world as humans essentially take over and industrialize. And that's something that I have noticed that, yeah, it's big in fantasy, period, but it does seem like a lot of Japanese stuff I've interacted with really kind of latches onto this idea of the world being lost and, everything changing very quickly and all the old ways kind of dying. So I think that's interesting because, that was in Princess Mononoke. That's a big thing in all the, like, Dark Souls games.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. I didn't know how much of that was it's just a fantasy thing because that is a big fantasy trope and how much of it was specifically, a Japanese cultural thing.
That's a good question, and honestly, as a as a dumb American, I don't know how to answer that. But I think there's something to note there. I don't think it'd be outlandish for me to say a lot of Eastern cultures, so to speak, have a lot more emphasis on nature and the environment than a lot of like we talked about in Mononoke. Western cultures tend to look over. Yeah, I think that's a fair understanding and a fair inquiry because, yeah, definitely here in America, we try to do our best, but I don't think we've always done our best. So,
yeah, and Japan specifically, I do wonder because I can only imagine that a culture and a way of life died very quickly. Like obviously there's still a lot of things carried over, but very quickly, the Americans moved in and really industrialized everything, and I'm sure a lot of stuff just changed super quickly. So I wonder if that is something that is explored in the art and stuff like that often.
I can see that, yeah. And going off the art there, that's something else I want to mention. I before we get too far again with the story, the art here is just gorgeous on some of these these views. Honestly, it's really good concept work. Honestly,
yeah. No, I really liked the landscapes. The attention to the detail as far as just, they'll be in a field and there'll be all these little flowers and stuff like that. It's really beautiful. And also the kind of fantasy medieval architecture was really cool.
yeah.
the kind of little village of the Iorfs that have these. They almost live in these temples, and
Yeah.
then I can't remember the name of the invading country, but they have these big grand castles with battlements and everything. So it's
Yeah.
really cool. Like all the design and even the clothes that people wear, I thought was really cool because it's kind of, and this mirrors a lot of other things about the movie. It's kind of, the backgrounds are just like lush and beautiful and grand architecture, and then people are wearing just very kind of drab clothing because I'm sure,
Yeah.
if they're going for kind of a medieval feel, I'm sure that's what people were wearing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I guess we can kind of go ahead and start walking through this if you're ready to, and I'll pitch in as needed, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. So we start in the village of the Iorfs. I don't know if it had a proper name, but it's where all the Iorfs live. We learn that, and if I miss any story beats, like I said, just jump in. We learn some of kind of the exposition about them, how they don't age. They live hundreds of years. I think it said that they stop aging kind of in the teenage, maybe early 20s.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
So that's kind of where their bodies stop aging. And then I'm sure, they still obviously have all the experience of hundreds of years, so they can still accumulate all this wisdom, even though they look very young.
Right, exactly.
When we are introduced to Maquia, her friend, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this friend that we meet at the beginning, what was her name? It was like Liana or Liliana
I
or
believe
something?
it's Lelia.
Lilia? Okay, thank you.
Lelia, yes.
Lelia?
It's like Leia, but with an extra Lee.
Okay, Lelia. So Lelia is like, fucking Maquia, look at this, I can fly. And she runs and she jumps off the, wall and kind of floats for a minute in air like you do before gravity takes a hold, and plunges into the water. And she's like, come on, Maquia, it's so much fun, do it. And Maquia's like, fuck that, like I'm gonna stay right here, I ain't fucking around with that. And
Yeah.
so we quickly learn that Maquia is pretty timid, and maybe
Sure.
not the most adventurous. And she, I think it's the elder is with them, is that correct?
Yeah, the elder.
Yeah, the elder is like, oh, Maquia, always quick to tears, because she's just kind of crying already. And
Yeah.
then we see all of Maquia's friends. Their parents come back to town. I guess they'd been out in the woods or something, and they've collected flowers and all these things.
Yeah, and like you said, it's this pristine Atlantean utopia that they live in. It's like a peaceful, lush village. Everyone's just like living like, in paradise, essentially, is what it looks like.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, the buildings are either these like huge temples that are really beautiful, filled with what is the name that they give those cloths?
The Hibiol.
Hibiol, yeah. So they're full of these hibiols, which I'll just go ahead and tell a little bit about. They are these, that look silken, these big silken cloths that they can, it doesn't get into the nitty gritty of it, which I like, but they, weave them, and this kind of records their history, and they can, read exactly what this person that wove it was thinking, basically what they're trying to get
Yeah.
at. And like that's not made super clear at the beginning, like if it's because they're like, oh yeah, it's our history, but it kind of feels like, oh, is that metaphorical? But then later
Right.
in the movie we see no, they can literally read, like, oh,
Yes.
this one says dear mom, whatever.
Yeah, and that's something they touch on later, where she kind of explores like what's important to be written and not.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. But
Yeah.
like you said, I think it's a really interesting kind of communication. I think that's an interesting kind of like world aspect of these people, where it's just kind of like they record their stuff on woven cloth, which is just like it's just a fun take on how societies record their own history.
Yeah, and it's really neat. Like I said, this temple, and there's this cloth just hanging everywhere, so it's really pretty. So it's aesthetically pleasing, and also I like that how often we see people working on these looms, and we see the
Yeah.
actual kind of labor of them making it, and recording their history and recording their feelings.
That animation is beautiful for that like movement of the cloth and the actual weaving process.
Yeah, like obviously I'm not an expert, but I'm like, oh, I kind of just watching that. I'm like, I kind of understand how a loom works now,
Yeah.
which was kind of neat. But yeah, back to the plot. All the parents come back and they're like, look at all this dope ass shit we got in the woods, and all their kids are like, fuck yeah, Dad, those are the best flowers I ever saw. And Maquia is just like, oh man, everybody else got a parent, but I ain't got shit.
Yeah.
And the elder, if I remember correctly, this is kind of when the elder is talking to Maquia, and the elder's basically like, hey, don't ever love anybody outside of this village, like any outsiders, because that's just going to be pain, and you're going to know what it's like to be truly alone.
Yes, exactly. And or it's a pretty pessimistic outlook.
Yeah, and I get where they're coming from, and once again, that's something that's in Lord of the Rings that we saw. It's a big thing in the Silmarillion, and in the film the film versions of the Lord of the Rings, they focus on it more than the books with Arwen and
Yeah.
oh shit, why am I blanking on Aragorn? Aragorn, when he dies, Arwen's going to be left alone because she's immortal. So that's also something that has been kind of a fantasy trope and has been played with before. So it is interesting to see that this, the elder is telling this child, like, hey, don't do that shit. And the kid kind of has to carry that with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's interesting. Pretty quickly after that. And it also, and maybe I didn't fully understand what they were getting at when I was watching the beginning, and then I understood more as I watched the rest of the film.
Yeah.
But, Maquia is in her room. The elders told her, like, hey, and so is she like the elder's helper or something, where she's an orphan? That's kind of the vibe I got. Like, the elder was raising her.
I think she pretty closely, like watches after her, but I don't think explicitly it's stated what relationship they have.
Okay, yeah.
I think she's just taking care of her.
Okay, yeah. I kind of figured, but she seemed to be, like I said, some kind of helper, maybe, because she was doing all kinds of
she definitely
work things with her.
Exactly.
But anyway, so she's like, oh, be sure to record the day. So she goes and she's working the loom, and she's just kind of like, she just seems like, fuck this, I'm tired of this loom. So she goes and sits in bed and looks out the window, and she sees a couple of other Iorfs. I was about to say, they look like teenagers, but they all look like teenagers. Like walking down through a bridge, if I remember correctly. And she, I guess, is just curious about what's up with them. So she follows them and is just fucking peeping on them. Yeah. And it's clearly a kind of a romantic moment that she's interrupted. It's not like explicitly like physical or anything, but they're watching these flowers bloom. And then when they see her, it very much feels like she's intruded. So, when I was watching it the first time, I was like, oh, is this kind of a forbidden thing because they're not supposed to make these connections? But I don't know if that was intended because, like I said, it feels like it's outsiders that they're not really supposed to love.
No, I think it's more so saying, like, I think it's honestly just a simple interaction between two of the Iorf, and they're just, like, falling in love. And she just happened to kind of spy in on that to see what was going on, and it was like, oh shit, another couple of people who are happy, who have each other, and I still have nobody. And I don't think it's really any ulterior. I don't think they're I'm not sure if it's explicitly stated that there's any thing against inter Iorf relationships, because the kids get to come from somewhere, but explicitly she's like, that's okay because we all have the same same lifespan. We're all with each other and we're safe. But she's like, don't ever trust anybody outside this village because you will get hurt and end up alone.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I gathered as I watched more of it. But like I said, there
Yeah.
was. And I thought this was kind of both a strength and a weakness in a way. It didn't really spend much time explaining how any of this stuff worked. So when you are first watching it, it's a little confusing. But then,
Oh no, it's definitely information overload where it's like, okay, well, explain to me how this works. And in a lot of ways, like because of the main story beats and what they are, doesn't really matter in a lot of
yeah,
ways, you know.
yeah, that's kind of what I was about to get at. Is it did what I thought was a pretty good choice, where there is kind of this big fantastical world, and it feels like there's a lot going on, but it does not focus on any of that bullshit because
Right.
like I'm just not personally a big fan of stuff that like yes, world building is cool and it's really important, especially in speculative genres and things, but there's something like Wheel of Time, which I really hot take. It's one of my least favorite things I've ever read. I really don't like it, and that's because it spends so much time on world building. That's
Just
all
over exposition. Am I understanding that?
Well, yeah, it's nothing but world building, and it's really cool stuff. But then when you get to the actual story between these characters, it's just not good because they're not
Yeah.
fully fleshed out. Like the world is very fleshed out, but then the characters are cardboard. So to me, it's just very
Yeah.
uninteresting. So it makes the wise decision of kind of being like, oh, there's all this crazy shit, but I'm not really going to tell you because who cares? And it's also
Yeah.
a neat trick of like, oh, I'll hint at these things. And it makes you think like, oh, there's all these cool things, but it
Yes.
doesn't have to waste time on it. So I think that's a really neat trick that they did, and I thought that worked well.
Very Elden Ring, very, very, very like FromSoft, exactly. Where it's like, we'll give you a little piece of the concept, you draw the lines. We don't care about that. Moving on. It's like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that worked. You know what I mean? I thought that really worked for me because the world felt really kind of expansive and really interesting.
Right.
But it didn't focus on that in a way that I thought was bogging down the story.
So I'm gonna make a comparison to another anime. Holy fucking shit! I'm sorry to anybody who was out. Hunter x Hunter is another anime. I hate how that magic system's handled in a lot of ways because it is literally just like, let me explain to you the different words and how you can combine them with secret combos and super special ability. I'm like, okay, guys, like, no, I'm not here for an etymology lesson. I'm here for an interesting and fun story.
Yeah, Tolkien, I don't remember the exact quote, but Tolkien had a really interesting quote where he was giving a lecture kind of on fantasy as a genre. And because, I don't know if you've ever read any of that stuff, but he does not really explain how the magic works, specifically in Lord of the Rings. If you read the Silmarillion, there's more stuff, but it's so expansive that it's like, oh, okay, this is just his history that he's built. But the actual magic and stuff, he doesn't really explain. And he has a quote where he says something like, if you explain how your magic works in your book, it's no longer magic. You've just invented an alternative science.
Exactly.
And
exactly. That's a great allegory.
yeah, so and that's another thing that like Wheel of Time really focuses in on. How does this like what's the mechanics of this? And if you think that's cool and interesting, awesome. I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Like I said, to me it does not serve a narrative or a story. Like it doesn't serve the kind of things I want to see. Is all I'm getting at.
Sure.
But yeah, so once again, does that well. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Okay. Awesome.
So then, pretty quickly, oh yeah. So they had their little romantic moment. They see Maquia, and they're like, well, "Why are you being such a fucking creep, Maquia? Why are you trying to watch us?" And they just see some goddamn dragons fly over, and they start throwing out more words I don't know. I think it was
Yeah.
So is it Mezart was the country, right?
Mazarte, yes. It's a
Mezarte.
country.
So they're like, oh my God, Mezarte's invading. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, if you say so.
Yeah.
So they tell Maquia, like, go get the fucking elders. Shit's about to get really bad. So she's running. She's looking for the elders. She can't find her. And then it cuts to kind of the town square, I guess. These fucking heavy metal plate armor knights land on their dragons, and they just like start hopping off of it. And one of them makes a comment that I was like, "What?" One of them's just like, "Wow, they really do look like, teenagers or children or whatever." And another one's just like, "Oh, I bet this is great for a pervert like you." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" Like,
no. Yeah, definitely definitely characterized the humans as pretty fucking evil pretty quickly.
yeah, I'm like, you gotta explain that. Who is this man? But yeah, so they're being assholes. Their leader, their commander is like, where's the elder basically, and is it the elder that comes to speak to them, or is it Lelia?
Basically, the commander's like, show me where the fucking elder is, and then the elder comes forth, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So the elder is just kind of like giving him shit, like, hey, we don't have anything that you would want. Leave us the fuck alone. They're just, very kind of dignified, but like, fuck off. And he starts walking towards the elder, and this guy is like, oh, you won't touch our elder. You won't lay hands on her. He just fucking slaps him. And
Yeah.
like with a gauntleted hand, so like that's fucking serious. Just backhands him, and the kid goes falling down the stairs, and everybody's like, "Oh, like this is actually about to be really bad."
This is bad. Yeah,
And like,
not great.
not to blame the Iorfs, but they apparently had zero way to defend themselves because it's like 6 guys murk the whole village.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
it's seriously like less than 10 guys just kill everybody. And I'm like, damn, they didn't even have a knife. Like, no,
Yeah.
the Iorfs were not prepared at all. And you would think that they
No.
would have realized maybe this was a possibility. So I was just like, damn, those Iorfs were too good for this world.
Yeah, these humans just come and slaughter this goddamn race of Mikolas.
Yeah, no, they're very elf coded in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I was just like, damn, they, like I said, they should have, instead of spending all that time making their claws, maybe they should have built a fucking ballista or something, because it like I said, it was seriously like 6 or 8 guys, and I was just
Yeah,
like,
no.
it's like, what the fuck. But anyway, so this is happening. One of the dragons just like fucking loses it for some reason, and we later learn that this is a disease, but we don't really know how or why this is happening. But anyway,
I think it's also at this moment in time, as we learn a little bit later, that the Iorf, being another one of those mystical races, maybe set something off in him, like a weird rage mode, seeing them up close or something like that. Like there's some kind of magical disease or decay happening too. Like you said, it doesn't go into it because it's really not relevant.
Yeah. And it does talk about how Mizarte, these dragons, that I don't remember what they call them because it's not dragons, but they're dragons.
Renato.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the Renato, the Mizarte have kind of used these not only as basically shock troops, but also it's just how they project this power and their legitimacy, essentially, because they're like, we have this old world magic thing that is why we're special, and the dragons are dying out, so that's kind of why they're getting the Iorfs, because they're like, oh, we need something else to project this strength and to like I said,
Precisely.
Kind of give them their idea of legitimacy. So anyway, the dragon starts freaking the fuck out. It flies through the tower, basically, or the temple where all of the cloths are that tell the history, and it gets tangled up in them and flies away. And Maquia is holding on to one of these cloths as the dragon's flying, and we get this really, really pretty shot that, if I remember correctly, this is the first time it does it, where it's an actual kind of sky, and this is really beautiful sky with animation below it, and so like that's really kind of an interesting thing that they did that I thought was really pretty.
Yeah, no, like I said, definitely a skilled animation team on this. It's like almost like a more photorealistic. It's more like photorealistic kind of spin on Ghibli, a little more kind of vibrant than Ghibli even. Ghibli's a little more kind of like watercolor, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of animation and artistic elements that they kind of blend together, and I think they're pretty successful. Because the dragon specifically and some other stuff is clearly 3D animation that they've
Yes.
implemented with their what looks like traditional animation. I'm sure it's probably not traditionally done. Like there's probably a lot of computers
Right.
involved in this,
Of
but
course.
it looks like that. And there's this very subtle kind of 3D animation that is probably saving them money, but it also like it works because it doesn't stand out. It looks like cohesive.
And that is an enormous debate amongst anime fans and like all kind of animation fans is this 3D versus 2D versus hand drawn. You have purists, you have hybridizations. I'm of the camp like you're in, where it's like I think it looks fine. I have no problem with them doing that because animating that big ass fucking dragon in 2D conventionally must, or even with computers, must be really fucking hard to do all those angles with. So I have no problem with it, but I think you need to be kind of, like you said, be kind of careful because a lot of times when you have the big stupid 3D thing, it looks really bad. You know what I mean? So it's like it definitely takes some skill to know how you said to blend it correctly without over blending it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and maybe it would have been really cool if it was looked more traditionally animated. Like maybe that would have been cool. I don't know. But I thought this worked, and like I said, I'm sure it saved them a lot of time and money, which when you have a movie with this kind of scope, like they could have spent all their money on that fucking dragon and then nothing else. You know what I mean? So
Right.
Whenever people are like, "Oh, well, it could have been better if they did X, Y, Z," it's like, okay, yeah, they probably didn't have the fucking money. Like,
Yeah.
so like, yeah, it would have been better if they had 1,700 animators hand drawing everything. But also, how are they going to pay for that?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I want to say there are some really shitty practices that are done by a lot of the bigger stuff. There's a lot of shows I love to death that, had some pretty rushed schedules, and a lot of that's apparent. A lot of criticism around that. And yeah, maybe animation companies shouldn't overwork their employees. That's my opinion. I think you should have a normal work week. People shouldn't be having to just like completely overcommit themselves just to get things out on time. And unfortunately, you see that a lot in the Japanese animation industry and here too in the States. It's not just Japan. But yeah, so I'm like you. I would rather them make intelligent decisions to keep their workload palpable as opposed to destroy themselves,
Yeah, for sure. And hey, as we learned in Harlan County, USA, fucking unionize if that shit's happening. But anyway, yeah, so I thought it worked. I thought it looked good. The dragon basically crash lands in a forest, and Maquia is clearly just like, what the fuck? She looks back towards her village, and she can't even see it, and she's just like, oh shit, I am in the middle of nowhere.
Truly.
I don't know where I am. You know what I mean? Like, shit's bad.
Truly
for her.
alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Truly fucked now. Which is like her biggest fear.
Yeah. And she pretty quickly hears a baby crying, and she follows that sound, and she finds a caravan, which has apparently been set on by bandits, and everybody's dead except for this baby. And she is looking at the baby kind of like, what the fuck? What do I do? There's this.
And it's important to yeah, go on. You got it.
No, I was about to say there's this. She doesn't see him at first, but this guy kind of pipes up, and I think his name was just like the merchant. Did he have a name?
I don't think he was named explicitly. No.
Yeah. So he's just kind of like, yep, some bandits came first he's like, you're Maquia, right? Like I saw you when I was in the town trying to buy liquor or something like that. And she's she's like looking at this baby, and she's just like, oh my god, the mother is kind of rigor mortis has set in as she's holding this baby, and the dude is pretty quickly just like, well, sucks to be that baby, it's gonna fucking die. Like it was just a little thread that didn't get woven into the tapestry basically. And Maquia does not accept that, and there's this really kind of harrowing scene where the baby's face is kind of pressed against its dead mother's hand and fingers, and she
Ugh.
has to like basically snap these fingers back. That, like I said, rigor mortis is set in, so she's like very stiff,
Yeah.
and she has to like kind of snap these fingers back to get the baby out. And I was just like, God damn, Maquia, like that's
Yeah.
fucking intense.
Yeah, but I think it's very quickly, like, it plays into, I think there's an internal monologue she has where she's like, he's actually truly alone. The only other living thing on this earth who's, afraid of what I'm afraid of that I've ever met. And she very quickly is like, I have to fucking save this baby. Like, I have to try my best to make sure it's okay.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, it kind of cuts to this farmstead kind of place, kind of vibe. And there are these two young boys being just ornery and playing, and the mother is clearly like taking no shit from these kids, no nonsense. And the dog starts barking towards their like little barn.
Yeah.
And she gets just like a rake because she doesn't have anything else. So she gets like this rake and she's going towards the barn, ready to see what's going on. And Maki is in there with the baby, and she's just kind of holding the baby up to a goat's udder because she doesn't know what to do. And the baby's just slapping that udder around, just having a grand old time. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
this was the first time I was just like, God, Maquia, stop being so fucking stupid. Like,
Yeah, and it very quickly points to the fact that she's 15 and has not really much experience aside from her little desk where she wove tapestries all day. So, like, she's just completely overwhelmed with this world. Like, I don't think she's ever left the village before. So she has zero clue what the fuck is going on or how to even be a mother to this, like, human child nonetheless.
yeah. So basically, the woman, the mother, who is Mido, what was her name?
I think Mito, yeah.
Mido. So Mido pretty quickly takes them in, and she's like, "What's the baby's name?" And Maki's just like, "I don't know. I just found this baby. I don't know what its name is." So she gives the baby a name, and the boys are like, "That's a girl's name. He needs a boy's name." So she settles on Ariel.
Ariel, yeah.
Ariel. And then it pretty quickly the mother Mido kind of takes her in town, and I thought this was really interesting. Takes her into the town, and the guy that's like kind of the shopkeep, I guess, she's telling him like, "Hey, this is my cousin from a few towns over. She's gonna be staying with us." And she says something about like, she's pretty good at weaving, so maybe she can get some work weaving because I know you have a loom in the back. And he's just like, okay, yeah, that little Iorf kid can work here if she wants.
Yeah.
And she's just like, sorry, I tried to lie to you. I know I can't get anything over on you. And he's like, no, I'm not going to say anything. Like, Iorf fabric goes for good money. He's like, I'm going to make money. She's going to make money. Like, it's all good. And I thought I thought that was really interesting of how we see, and this is something that, we see throughout, kind of Makia's culture and something that is, kind of holy to them, where it's all of their history and it's, all of their art and just everything kind of rolled into one. To everyone else, it's just a commodity. They're just like, oh yeah, it's high quality fabric.
Yeah. So like whatever they want to use it for, they'll use it for, even though it's John Smith's entire life on paper.
yeah, like none of that matters. It's just like, it's just kind of bougie fabric that like it's the nice stuff. So I thought that was really interesting as a concept, and we see it again and again, and once again, it doesn't really linger on it. But I did,
for sure.
I did think it was neat.
Yeah, no, and that's something too. Like that scene, that I think is supposed to highlight as well that the IR were very much targeted. They're very much like, hey, like they're very much trying to be found and like sniffed out by the Mazarte government just to make sure that they have complete control of the situation when it comes to like their bloodline and like their powers of long life. It's like you said, they're one of the main things we learn here actually is that we'll learn eventually is that that's really the ultimatum of Mazarte is we want to have their blood mixed with ours for long living people.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, once again, like the dragons obviously are kind of military importance, but we learn that they don't have very many, and it's not like they breathe fire or anything. So, they probably aren't even that ferocious on the battlefield. We don't see them when they're slaughtering the Iors. It's not the dragons doing it. They just kind of rode in on them. So it definitely feels like, okay, these aren't actually, they're projecting strength, even though they aren't necessarily this huge like military advantage.
Right, nukes. They're not
Yeah.
nukes, but they're still soldiers. I think actually, even on the way home from this scene, from the where Daryl takes her in to work in his shop in that town, Mito tells Maki, she's like, yeah, the Renato killed my husband. He's gone because of those damn things. But it's like, yeah, but those dragons were pretty much enslaved.
Yeah, yeah. So it's once again kind of this idea of they are just craving legitimacy, which I think is kind of a neat idea because when you look at a lot of these medieval rulers, these kings, and all these different, I mean, they started out as warlords. You know what I mean? Like that's where all of these medieval kingdoms came from. But they didn't like the fact that their ancestors were just thugs. So
Of course
they, quote unquote, followed their lineage back to these Roman senators. And so it was just like this weird thing that they had to tell themselves and each other to give themselves legitimacy. And that's kind of what this feels like, is they're trying to claim these old, ancient, magical things because they're like, oh, that's why we're rulers. That's why we're in charge, because we have dragons and, that makes us special. Or like we control the Iorfs and we're going to live long like them. And that's why we should rule. So I thought that was another kind of, there's a lot of kind of cool ideas that they don't dwell on. And once again, strength and a weakness, because some of the things they do dwell on, I think aren't nearly as interesting. But if they just spent time on all of this stuff, it probably wouldn't be as interesting as it is by just being kind of background,
Sure. I think that's completely fair to say. So I think after this, we kind of get a cut to the city where we see a young woman, a young Iorf, talking to the head commander of the guards. And I believe they're talking to all of the remaining Renato, actually.
Yeah. So the Renato are dying out, and they are, having to destroy the corpses because they're afraid that this disease is communicable, and that's kind of what is happening to them. So they're like, burn it to the bones, and then bury the bones very deep. So yeah, and the king, who is kind of just a little shit stain, he is going to marry the prince off to this Iorf who was Maquia's friend, Lelia.
Correct. Yeah.
So he's going to marry her to his son, and that's going to kind of be where this bloodline begins of these long-lived kings.
Exactly. So I think it's pretty critical here. I'll chime in and say this. So the last thing we kind of get here, as far as like what's happening in this point in time, is Mito tells Maquia, listen, like this is being a mom is hard. Like my husband died. I had being a single mother is extremely difficult, and you're 15 and you don't even know, you're not even the same species as him. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. And she was like, are you fucking sure this is what you want? And Maki is like, no, yeah, I'm committed to this. I want to take care of him as his mother and do the best I can, even though obviously I'm not his mother. So, and after that point, we have our first time skip. I believe it jumps about 6 years into the future.
Yeah, I did look on Wikipedia just to kind of understand these time skips a little bit more, and yeah, it was 6 years. A lot of them seem to be like 6 years, 9 years. So I mean, they're pretty big skips.
Yes.
So yeah, this we get to see Ariel, who he's still a little kid, obviously, but he's grown up a lot since we saw him as a baby. This is the point where he's like getting bullied. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's like 9 or 10. His brothers are like teenagers, their puppy's older. At the point where the puppy's like sitting in a basket for most of her day, which is really sweet.
Yeah, and Ariel makes one of the cloths. What are they called again?
Hibial.
The hibio. He makes a hibio for the dog so it can like cover up and be cozy.
Aw.
You're being bullied by other kids his age because he just fucking loves his mom. And this one girl is just like, boys aren't supposed to love their mom. And they're just like giving him shit. They're like, oh, fucking mama's boy. And he tells this girl, he's just like, I hate you. I fucking hate you. And like storms off. And she's upset, she starts crying.
Yeah.
And all the other kids are just like, why are you upset? That little fucking nerd. Who cares what he thinks?
Yeah.
Like,
And that girl's name is Dita. It's very much played off like, the little kids bullying each other because they like each other kind of deal, But
yeah. And it's around this time. And I thought this was kind of a cool, fun way to incorporate the way that they keep history with the plot. So I think it's the same little shop.
Yes.
Maquia finds this. God, and you just told me the name. I'm so sorry. What was it called again?
A Hibial.
Hibial. I'm gonna remember that eventually. So she finds a hibial that has the story of her friend that has been taken and by the Mizarte and is going to marry the prince. So she's just like, oh my God, what the fuck? Like, I need to do something.
Yeah. She's like, Lelia's telling me where she is.
Yeah. So that's what kicks off them leaving. Is that correct? And they get on the boat, right?
Yeah. Basically, I think Maquia tells me she's like, listen, like, we're gonna help you find a way to get to that fucking capital. Go find your friend, do your best for him, and she's just like, okay, and she basically warns Maquia. She's like, you're taking Ariel, like, someone's gonna notice you. Like, you have a kid. You can't go unnoticed. And they actually, at this point, I think briefly before, they decided to dye her hair like a kind of copper brown, just to kind of make sure no one could see her like textbook Iorf blonde hair. And so she's disguised, but it's like someone's going to figure out that she's not a human, that she's not familiar with things, that she's not been raised or understanding of human ways, or that she's not aging. It's another big one. And so someone's going to notice her and go like, well, fucking lock her up because she's a threat to our, our cause or whatever, which is fucked up. But even with that in mind, she's like, no, I that's my friend. Like, our village was raided. I have to go find her.
Yeah, and they are on a boat. Like, I say a boat, but like it's a ship. Like, they're in the interior of a big ship. And Ariel is just like being a kid running around, and he bumps into this guy, and he is also an Iorf. We learn that his name is Krim. And this was kind of one of the first times when I was just like, who is this? You know what I mean? Like, one of the downsides of it tries to do so much in the span of 2 hours. Like, it's a lifetime, literally. A lot of stuff gets skipped over, and Krim, I felt like, was one of those things because he does a lot of things to kind of push the plot forward, but that is all he does. Like, he is not a character. He is something that advances the plot,
And that's fair of you to say, because honestly, I would argue too that like he is as an overall character isn't critical to the main character narrative. Yeah, he's a plot device, but like at some point, I don't think he's really a character focus, So it's kind of like it's like, oh yeah, this is my buddy Krim. It's like, oh okay, I'll just take that for the horse's mouth. Like, okay, they know each other. That's all I need to know.
Yeah, and that was kind of one criticism I came away with was there were so many characters that we met that I would have preferred to see more about them over Maquia, because like, not that story wasn't interesting. It's just that like Maquia as a character was not as interesting to me as some of the other people that we just see a little bit of. So like it keeps introducing characters like just so many on top of each other that it's like, oh, okay, they seem really cool, and then they're gone. You know what I mean? I didn't think that was so much a thing with Krim, just because he wasn't characterized as much, but like, Leliana, is that right?
Lelia.
Oh, Lelia. Lelia, like, I wanted to see so much more of her. You know what I mean? Because she seemed to have a lot going on, and there seemed to be a lot of kind of interesting folds to that character that we didn't really get to explore. So, like I said, double-edged sword, sometimes that works really well, where they're not dwelling on things that aren't necessarily important. But then sometimes I feel like there's some really cool stuff, like really cool character moments that we're not getting, because it is like pushing the plot forward so fast, you know?
I can see what you mean by that, because I think Lelia is an interesting character, and I agree. I think they probably could have tacked on another 20 minutes to this movie and gotten a little more of her story too. I definitely don't think it detracts from Maquia's per se, because I think really the main focus of this movie is Maquia and Ariel and their interaction. I think it's everything else around it's kind of supplemental to the kind of their people and like their kind of family group, so to speak. But no, I see where you're coming from for sure. Yeah. For me, it's like, it doesn't detract so much, I don't think, but that's just me.
Yeah. No, I think I would have enjoyed this a lot more if it was like a mini series or something.
Really interesting.
Yeah, because there were so many times that I was like, wait, why didn't you show me that? Because that seems really important. And instead it was spending time on things that I was like not as excited about, you know?
Sure.
So yeah, there were a lot of times I was like, oh yeah, this would have like worked really well as like a series. Or just like, you know, something with more time. But anyway, to get back to the plot, Krim is basically pretty quickly just like, hey, I'm a terrorist. I'm gonna
yeah, pretty much.
He's like, me and the lads, we're gonna fuck this parade up. We're gonna get our friend back. They're making her have a kid with the fucking prince. We're not about that shit. So we're gonna do some terrorist shit. And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. Like, like so much of this movie up to this point has been Maquia crying, and I'm like, okay, something is happening. So we like kind of get to that scene. Ariel wants to go to the parade, and Maquia is
I'll
like,
interrupt real fast here. So something that Krim does mention that's kind of a central point too to this whole movie, and is really kind of the whole point of the movie, is he calls her out, and he's like, hey, listen, why are you calling this kid your son? We both know it's not your son, and you know that we're not supposed to be doing this shit. And he's just like, you know what's going to happen. He's going to die way before you do. And she's like, no, yeah, I know. And it's something too that echoes back to a further scene, because the dog on the farm where she was with Ariel and the two other boys, the dog passes away at one point, which is sad. And they bury it, and it's like a very sad scene where they're all mourning him, and it's just like they cared about him very much, obviously. But Ariel just doesn't. She has to explain to Ariel, like, okay, does everyone die? And she's like, yes. And she's like, will you die? And she's like, yeah, I am, and and it's gonna be way after you, which kind of tears her up.
Well, Maquia, once again, like, Maquia doesn't get that moment, so like. That is because she runs away and cries, and like this is something that I really didn't like about this movie, is I felt like Maquia didn't get much agency, and the plot kind of happened to her, and that's why everyone around her was so much more interesting to me, because Ariel is like, does everybody die? And she kind of runs away and cries, and then Mito is like the one that does the cool thing, where she's just like, yeah, everybody dies, and Ariel's like, do mommies die? And she's like, yeah. Like she doesn't sugarcoat it. She's just like, yeah, they're gonna, like, everybody's gonna fucking die. And I was like, once again, I was just like, oh, that's such a cool, like, I really liked Mito. I thought she was a really cool character. And there's this one kind of part that kind of comes up a few times when Maquia is kind of asking her, like, oh god, how do you be a single mother? And she goes like, it just takes a lot of guts. And she just like slaps her stomach, like, I'm just full of fucking guts, like, that's how I do it.
That's funny. But yeah, it's interesting you feel that way, because I honestly, like, I guess the internally it's like, I can't imagine having to know that, having to raise this kid just to know that you're gonna have to break his heart after 7 or 8 years of being with them is be like, oh yeah, this isn't gonna be easy just to say fuck you. You don't understand this, but like, you know what I mean? It's like I can't imagine having to tell a kid like, hey, yeah, I don't get. I'm gonna die a long time after you, and I have to watch you go, and I'm gonna fucking hate it because then I'm gonna have literally nothing.
See, like, and to me, like, that's her cross to bear. Like, Ariel's getting a sweet deal where, like, he never has to see his mom die. You know what I mean? So,
oh yeah,
like,
but it's a double-edged sword, right? Where it's like you don't want to have to see your kid die as well.
yeah, but
It's sad.
yeah, and like, obviously that's terrible for her. But like, all I'm getting at is like, that gut punches to her, not to Ariel. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah. No, I get it. In that moment. Yeah, she's hurt in that scene exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah. So, just getting back to the ship. Like I said, they're pretty quick. Oh, okay. No, we were past that. We were at when the parade is about to happen. Ariel's like, "Mommy, I want to go see the parade," and she's like, "Man, no, you fucking don't."
Yeah, you're staying away from that shit.
So he stays back. The parade is happening, and it's like very grand. All these soldiers and knights marching across this bridge, and Krim just runs out of the crowd, and their biggest dragon, he just stabs it in the fucking ankle, and it freaks out. Obviously, it starts knocking people off the bridge and killing people, and in all of this chaos, Maquia runs up to the. It might have been on the back of another dragon where Lelia is, and she's like, "Lelia, we're here to get you. Like, we gotta get out of here." So Lelia goes with her. They run for a little bit, but they don't get that far. And she basically tells Maquia, like, "Hey, I'm not, like, I can't go with you." And she's like, "Why?" And she touches her stomach, and she's like, "I'm pregnant. Like, I now have this responsibility. This is now part of my life." And once again, like, all these good character moments are going to other people. She tells Maquia to like run because the head of the guards and some soldiers are running down this alley towards them, and Maquia just kind of stands there not knowing what to do, and we don't see who it is, but it was like kind of clearly the what was that guy's name? The guy that doesn't have a name. What was everybody calling him?
It's just like the guard commander.
No, the merchant. The merchant. Like runs and grabs her. Well, we don't see that's him, but like who else would it be? The guard commander's running after him, and she Lelia takes the pin out of her hair and puts it to her like stomach, and she's like, "If you touch them, I'm gonna kill this fucking baby." And I was just like, God damn, you know what I mean? Like, this is why I wanted to see more of her, because I was like, she is doing things, like she is making some wild like decisions and sacrifices. So I was like, that's crazy. Like, that's such a cool character moment.
Okay.
We pretty quickly catch up with Maquia and the merchant, who reveals himself to be half Iorf, and if I remember and understood correctly, he was the son of a human man and the elder. Is that correct?
I don't remember explicitly who he says. Yeah, the elder. If it's an elder or not, honestly, I didn't take note of that. But the important thing here is it's just he's half Iorf, so that's why he knows who she is. That's why he's familiar with her and their whole group, and kind of why he's in the know about what's going on here.
Yeah. So, and like I said, I could have misunderstood or whatever, misinterpreted, but what I got was he was the elder's son, and that's why she is so adamant that people not love outside of the group, because she did that and she was hurt, But like I said, I could have misunderstood that.
Sure. But yeah, I think what's really what's really kind of critical here is that like you said, Lelia is really like, I mean, she probably could leave and have the baby, but like also I think it's kind of like she may have even accustomed to this new life she's in. I don't know. It's almost kind of a Stockholm syndrome turned not Stockholm syndrome situation,
Yeah, yeah. And the vibe I got was that she, like in that situation, there's no winning because if you take
Yeah.
this kid and, try and live somewhere else, they're going to find, like, they're going to hunt you down. So it might have been that simple. She's just like, look, I kind of have to be here if I'm going to be there for my kid and be able to like have a life with my kid.
Right.
So
Right.
that's kind of what I got out of it. Um, but yeah, so like I said, I thought that was just such a really cool character moment where she was just like protecting the last of her kin. She's like, I'll fucking do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a cool moment.
Yeah.
Where do we go from the merchant and there's like another big time skip? Like no,
Yeah.
the other Iorfs leave without Maquia because she has Ariel, and they're just like, look, you can't be committed to us in this life while you have Ariel, because
Exactly.
they're basically like, we're gonna keep trying to get uh
Lelia.
Lelia. Yeah, I'm so sorry, I keep forgetting these names. They're like, we're gonna keep trying to get Lelia back, like we're not gonna give up on her, but you're not gonna be able to really do this
Yeah,
with
he's like,
us.
you have a kid. Like, you're gonna be in the way, in like quite frankly dead way. Again, kind of the same thing. It's like you can't have both. Like, what do you do? Do you run away and not have your kid, or do you fucking stay here and have your kid? Like, you can't have. You have to choose, right? And it's saying like, you're either with us without the kid, or get away, because otherwise, like, we have a mission here, and they hate this government that's basically enslaving Lelia.
Yeah, yeah, and if I remember correctly, at this point, there's another pretty big time skip of like 10 years or so.
Yes, it's like, yeah, there's 6 or 7 years. I think Ariel is a teenager, and I think is a little montage here of Maquia kind of looking around for jobs, kind of knocking on everyone's door will fucking take her, and to the point where it's like they decide to just go to a new town. I think this is where they end up in the industrial kind of town.
Yeah, there is this one really funny part I want to talk about before the time skip, actually, where she's looking for work, and she's like in this store or like inn or something, and the guy that runs it is like, oh, I can see trouble and you all are trouble, I don't want anything to do with you all. And he's like, get out of my whatever. And he's on a step stool, and Ariel just walks up behind him, just fucking kicks the step stool, and this guy eats shit. And I thought that was so funny. Like, this kid he's got chutzpah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, he's very like free and wild and very just mischievous. We even see like later, right before they get moving, like there's a scene where basically Makia's out like, looking for jobs. She's trying to make money. She's just kind of doing whatever she can to get them food, and she comes home, and we see that Ariel has actually gotten into the loom for the Hibial and just like fucking gone at it, like just fucking went for it. And I think Maquia at this point is very fucking like defeated, and she's just like, I'm fucking like, I have imposter syndrome, like I can't be a mom. And she's like, why are you making my life so fucking hard? What are
Yeah.
you doing? And she's very much like, everyone was right, this is a waste of my time, I'm a fucking fuck up, we all know it, it's not gonna work. And basically uh he runs away and just kind of runs outside. And she's kind of like realizing, oh fuck, I let him go, I need to make sure he's okay. Like, I promised him I'd look after him. And then she fucking notices that he actually had written like my mommy in the Hibial. So it's like, it's just a very sweet, like, that's something kids do all the fucking time, and it's like we take it for granted, but it's like I remember doing shit like that with my mom, you know. And it's like, it breaks my heart to kind of know like the crushing weight of adulthood may get in the way of seeing that stuff sometimes.
Yeah, and that, just to make it clear, that was before the big time skip when they're in the industrial
Yes.
city.
Yes.
But yeah, so they like pretty quickly make up because she like goes looking for him, and he plays a prank on her, and then they're like just back to normal or whatever. But then is the big time skip, and like you said, they're in this industrial city. She has a job as a waitress, and
Yes.
he has a job as working in a mine or a forge or something. I don't really remember, but it was like something hard labor. It's something pretty intense.
Yeah, it's not really disclosed again because it's not really relevant. But I think he's working like in a mine a lot of the time. He's got a gang of his friends that kind of work with him, and he's kind of close with, that kind of hang out at the inn she works at, or the bar she works at.
Yeah. So yeah,
It's this big sprawling city with these giant wheels and these giant mine carts and shafts and shit, just interconnected with steam towers everywhere. It's really cool. Visage of the city.
Yeah, and like you said, Ariel kind of has these guys he works with that he hangs out with. They come into the inn where Maquia is working, and it's clearly not only is she super busy, because that's just what it's like being a waiter or waitress, but people are slapping her ass. And
yeah, not great.
And Ariel's friends are because I think that they're saying that they're brother and sister at this point. They're like, "Wow, your sister has such a great ass," and Ariel's just kind of I didn't notice. And it's man, you got to smack that fucking dude, Ariel.
Yeah, no, it's weird though, because he's also kind of come to terms with wow, I've been lied to, and what the fuck is my home life? He's just kind of well, I'm a fucking teenager. This shit's weird. I don't like living with my fake sister. This is odd. And it's like seeing everyone else around him with quote unquote normal families and structures. It's having that conceptualization as a teenager definitely doesn't help with this really fucking weird situation he's in. He's just kind of really I don't get what's happening here. Why am I in this situation?
Yeah, and we see that get really uncomfortable and weird here soon.
Yeah.
But if I remember correctly, it's about this time that they meet one of the brothers his adoptive brothers that he grew up with on that farm. I think his name is Lang. Is that right?
Yeah, Lang.
So they meet him. He is now a soldier in the or a knight or something. Well, I guess he's more of a soldier.
Yeah.
In the army of the Mazarte, yeah, he's a soldier with them, and he goes with them to their apartment, and he ends up I don't remember exactly how this happens, but he ends up kind of proposing to Maquia, and he's just hey, you could live with me, we could be together, we could be happy.
Yeah.
And Maquia's no, I can't do that. She's just very committed to. Well, first off, I think she doesn't want another kind of person that she's
she's gonna lose.
Yeah.
She's already committed to losing Ariel at some point, and she knows it, and she's just kind of well, I don't want to do that with a husband too. She's just kind of I like you, Lang, a lot, but no, because that's just too much for me.
Yeah, and the way that she phrases it is she's just kind of oh, I'm just committed to Ariel.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what it feels like. Is she's just look, that's not going to end well either.
Exactly. Yeah.
She took Ariel in because she had to, basically, and it's not because she was she did it begrudgingly, but it's just how are you going to leave a baby? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
But she's look, I'm not going to choose that again. Yeah. But anyway, he goes to their apartment, and they share a meal. And Ariel's well, I got to go to work. And he's just kind of being shitty about it. And, just like a teenager.
Teenagers.
And Lang says something oh, you have a date? And he's yeah, I have a date with a coal mine, I guess, or a mine.
Yeah.
So he leaves. And if I remember correctly, it's that, after his shift, basically, he gets really fucking drunk. These guys are oh, drink this, and he doesn't drink, but everybody's kind of peer pressuring him, so he gets really drunk. He goes home, and he's Maquia comes out because he's she hears him fall over or something, and he like falls into her arms because he's having trouble staying on his feet, and he's like, "Oh, where's my welcome home kiss like you used to give me?" And I was
Yeah.
like, well, I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, and she slaps the shit out of him. She's like, "What the fuck did you just say to me?"
no, it's not then when she slaps him. Like she's clearly uncomfortable with it, but it like they go in the apartment. It kind of continues to escalate. He steps on the piece of cloth that he had made her that says mommy or whatever, and she's like, don't step on that, and she grabs it, and they kind of like, if I remember correctly, he slips when she grabs it, and there's this like very kind of deliberate scene, or like deliberate shot, I guess you'd say, where he like falls and has her pinned against the table, and like it just shows his hands on either side of her, and that's when she slaps him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, sorry. What I meant earlier was I mixed the two up. She pushes him off of him. Like she's not. She's clearly like, no, you don't. Do not fucking do that to me. That's all I was getting at. She's like, absolutely not. The slap comes later, physically, yes.
Yeah, but no. What I'm getting at is like, it feels like it could have continued to escalate. Like,
yes,
that shot feels very deliberate. Of like, oh, he is kind of imposing himself and like trapping her.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, and then she slaps him, and it like de-escalates basically. Like nothing happens. But that part, I was like, oh man, that's some heavy ass shit right there.
Yeah, and that kind of really influences him in the next kind of decision making process too. Because that's really the boiling point for their relationship. He's already kind of like frustrated with like the weird shit he has to deal with. It's like, I don't have a mom, I have a sister mom weird thing who's not related to me at all. It is a not, he clearly knows what's going on. And it's like, it's just very much like unspoken, like, yeah, you're just gonna stomach that and deal with it. Let's move on to the next place after 2 years, and after 2 years we'll move on to somewhere else. And I think Maki's even like, well, where do you want to move now that we're outed here and things aren't great? Let's go find another place and I'll be there. And she's very like naively optimistic about that, where she's just kind of like, I really just want to be with you no matter fucking what. But like, she's not really letting him grow up to be an adult, and I think because of that, he's just kind of like fucking getting so pent up with rage and bullshit. He's just like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand what you want me to be to you, because I cannot grow with you around me. Which is just this weird amalgamation of just like self-loathing and just stress. It's really heavy, because it's really fucking heavy.
Yeah. And so like this is all going on, and I believe it's kind of before this even, it shows Lelia, who is a prisoner in the castle, and she has not been able to see her daughter since she gave birth. And the daughter is showing no signs of being like half Iorf. So, she's aging normally. There's like some other stuff that they talk about, like other signs that she doesn't have, but like the big thing is she is aging normally. And so they're just like keeping her away from the daughter, and like I said, she's a prisoner. And we do get a little scene where it's like a flashback where we see some of the Iorfs once again tried to free her. They like broke into her room, and the guards just fucking massacred them. Like they just killed all these guys that had come in, and it wasn't even, like when we see it, it's not like it was even a fight. Like these guys were just unarmored, and they had some knives. And these guys
they're clearly like ragtag group of like bandits against soldiers who are heavily armed and trained.
Yeah, and like have armor on, so like they had no chance of ever doing anything. And she's like telling the captain of the guard, she's like, don't try and comfort me. You're a fucking murderer. Like, you killed my friends in front of me. And, so that's kind of going on at the same time.
Yeah.
We get back to Maquia and Ariel, I guess it's probably the night after it got so bad. He goes and he finds Lang, and he's like, hey, you gotta help me be a guard in the palace. Like, I want to become a soldier. That's what I want to do. And Lang is like, well, it's going to kill your mother. And he's just like, that's not my mother. And Lang
And he's like, did you fucking say that to her?
yeah, he's like, did you say that? And he's like, yeah, I think I did. I was drunk. And he like grabs him and he's like, she's done everything for you. Like she has worked
He's like screaming at Ariel. He's pissed.
yeah, he's like, she has worked so hard. She's done all of these things. Like she has only ever tried to be the best mother she could to you. And at some point, Maquia kind of comes around the corner and she hears a lot of this. Ariel kind of breaks down and he's like, I know she's done all these things for me. I am kind of an age where I need to start doing these things for her. I need to be able to protect her. I need to be able to make sure that, she doesn't have to move around so much because, people are going to find her out.
And also, he kind of says, like, I'm not strong enough to protect her, kind of alluding, like, he fucking endangered her that one night. He's like, I can't, he's like, he probably feels guilty for that, too, as part of the reason. He's like, I can't keep putting that situation on the table. That's not going to fly. He's just like, I have to find my own life now. It's gotten too bad.
Yeah. So that kind of happens. We see he goes and he's getting his stuff packed because Lang is like, okay, I'll sign you up. So he's getting his stuff packed, and they kind of have this moment where Maquia is clearly like putting on a brave face, and she's just like, "Oh, I'll see you soon. Be safe. Don't do anything dangerous." And he's just kind of like, "Yeah, I'll see you soon," and leaves. And Maquia breaks down. She's crying, and then we see somebody like break in, and it doesn't really let us know who or what happened. And
Right.
if I remember correctly, this is another big time jump.
Yes, this is kind of, so we see. Yeah, I think it cuts way ahead at this point now. And I think one of the first things we see is that Ariel has become a soldier. He's actually performing as a soldier. Lang is still a bit more senior of a soldier now. They're still working for Mazarte. Lang is kind of a career in a career at this point. Like, he's pretty far in. But I think the big plot point in this time jump is that Ariel's kind of marching up around and about, marching. We see that all of the Renato are dying. The ones that used to be in the parades are just puppets now, and everyone's just commenting like, "Wow, we don't even have fucking real dragons anymore, guys." It's clearly starting to like affect like the symbolism that they so very much held high, so to speak. But I think the big plot point here is that an enemy kingdom has stolen an Iorf, just like Mazarte did with Lelia, and so that's kind of the inciting development for this time jump. And obviously, like you could infer from this that it could very well be Maquia.
Yeah, so, and also another thing to note is Ariel has a pregnant wife, and it is that girl that bullied him about loving his mom, Dita, and so they've gotten married off screen. And we learn that Maquia was kidnapped by Krim, who has somehow, and like this is kind of like what I'm getting at when I say that like there's so many big plot points that are just completely skipped over. Like not only Ariel and Dita meeting up again and how they fall in love, but like so Krim has somehow leveraged the fact that he has Maquia to get together like a conglomeration of these different kingdoms to attack. And like this is kind of what I'm getting at is like some of the stuff it skips over is so important that I'm like, but how did Krim do this? Because last time we saw him, he was just kind of a guy that was like, I'm going to be a terrorist. And
I think for me to answer that question, like I think for me this movie really is more so about the Maquia Ariel kind of relationship above everything else in this movie. And I think, like you said, in 2 hours time it would get pretty bulky to include all those other side plots. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. It would be cool to see how all that stuff happened and get a little more characterization of him. I just don't think with 2 hours you're going to be able to do that and still have that central focus,
Yeah, but the problem that I had with it was all this other stuff was so much more interesting to me than the Maquia Ariel stuff.
Interesting.
Because
like, I disagree on that one, but I think that's just a matter of personal preference at the end of the day.
And like, I'll be honest with you, man. I just really don't like Maquia as a character. She is so incredibly passive. Like, she does not drive anything. And I wouldn't have a problem with that if, because, like, people tend to be like, oh, that's passive character, that's bad. I don't think it's necessarily bad, because you can have a passive character that's not driving the plot, and, like, stuff is just happening to them, and then we get, like, their reaction, and that can be really interesting.
Absolutely, yeah.
Maquia's reaction to everything is she cries. So, like, it's just not interesting to me. Like, I just don't think that Maquia was, like, she just felt really one note to me. And, like, the kind of tension there of her being like, am I a good mother, doesn't work for me, because she so clearly is. And she's constantly like, oh, but am I meant to be a mother? Am I a good mother? It's like, you've done nothing but be a good mother. So, like I said, that tension just doesn't work for me. You know what I mean?
Really, I'm sad to hear that, because that's one of the biggest driving things for me throughout all this, was kind of just that driving kind of acceptance of realizing that you've done right by your kid, and actually verbalizing that. And it's like, yeah, I think everyone knows at the end of the day that that's probably true, but it's especially with her knowing that she will have to lose him, and knowing that, like, she will never have the same normal quote unquote life he does. It's just, for me, that's just such a heart wrenching concept where it's like, you can't be able to relate to that. It does carry enough for me where I can kind of look at some of these war things and, like, the crim things as side content where they're really not so forefront in my brain. I definitely understand that if you're more interested in that, why you want to see more. And yeah, I would like to see more of it, but I think you'd have to have, in a movie form, at least 3 hours to satisfy both of those things,
Yeah, and that's why I was saying I think I would have liked this a lot more as a series, as
Sure.
kinda, even like a 10-episode miniseries, because, like I said, the kind of, like, driving thing just didn't really work for me, and
Really?
that's why I was more interested in all these side characters, because I thought that they were doing interesting things, and felt, even though we didn't spend nearly as much time with them, they felt a lot more fleshed out to me than Maquia does.
That's interesting. Like I said, like, to me, obviously they're important to the story, but they really weren't, like, the center focus just for me. I was comfortable not having the side stuff, fully fleshed. I was comfortable just saying, okay, I can take it for what it is and just move on. To me, that didn't bother me so much. But I definitely think you're really wanting to see more of those details, to actually see that before and after kind of completed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I said, it's not even that I'm like, oh, I need to see how all this works. Like I said, it's more so that like I said, where the main thing isn't working for me, that I'm like, okay, well, why don't you at least show me these, like, big plot points that are happening off screen?
I see what you're saying. I was satisfied with the main thing, and so I didn't need those side things. I definitely see where you're coming from with that, where it's like, for me, if the whole Maquia thing went there, I don't think I would even care about most of the side stuff unless it was, for me, it's like either do Maquia or the side stuff. I don't really care. Obviously, like, it's relevant, but, like, the Maquia Ariel thing was the main narrative for my eyes. Again, the side stuff, like, is important to me. I could definitely see why it's important to everybody else. But yeah, I think you either enjoy that main facet, like you said, or don't. I happen to, so I have no problem with it.
And because, like, I understand what they were trying to do, where it's like, okay, she has been brought up in such a way that she's been told explicitly, don't love anyone not within this group, because you will lose them and you will be hurt. So that's an interesting idea of, like, because the actual concept I really like. And at first I was afraid that they were going to do just kind of a romance, and I was like, oh, that's not super interesting. But then she finds the baby, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, actually.
Right.
But like I said, she never really fails as a mother. Like, there's the one scene where she's like she's just fed up with them, but then that tension is gone so quickly that if they had explored that more of, like, okay, how does this upbringing affect how she relates with her son, I think it would have worked a lot more for me. Whereas, like I said, she is only ever a great mother, and she only ever does everything in her power for this kid. And so for that reason, the tension just wasn't there for me. Does that make sense?
I think I see what you're getting. Like I said, for me, where it's like, I think the kind of Shakespearean tragedy of knowing the end is coming is really what drove me. Where it's like, it's like, you're going to lose them. It's just like, at what point, and at what point do you just kind of let that happen? Was my kind of whole thing. It's just like, many times we see the Ariel's put into like these situations. We'll see here in a minute, but like, the movie straight up tells you in the beginning, it's like, here's what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And then it fucking happens. And it's like, well, it's not even that I wasn't surprised by it, because I wasn't surprised by it, but it was like, it's just, I'll explain a little bit more of this at the end of the movie too, but I think just the way it conveys those emotions was enough for me to just be fully effective, because I love this movie very much. Like I said, I definitely see why you would want more if that main story beat isn't enough.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not trying to dog it, because there was a lot of stuff I did like about it, and I hope that's come through with our conversation so far. But like, as it got closer and closer to the end, and these emotions got bigger and bigger, they just didn't feel like they'd earned that for me. You know what I mean? So like, it just started to feel more and more like kind of soapy and like a melodrama with these like big emotions that I was like, well, I'm not that invested in this. Like, I hope that makes sense, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm just completely shitting on it, because there was a lot of stuff I did like, but kind of that, by the end of it, that driving thrust just hadn't quite worked for me.
Okay, yeah, that's a matter of opinion then, man. Honestly.
Yeah, and that's all it is. Like, I'm not saying it's bad. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that, like, for me, that didn't quite work.
Fair enough.
But we can definitely continue with the plot, because I think we were basically at the part where Krim has gotten all these kind of nations together to invade, and they are both, coming down from the mountain and also from the sea. They're firing cannons at the palace.
It's an all-out attack, yeah.
Yeah. Ariel has, like, seen that this is happening. He's left his pregnant wife, who, like, goes into labor instantly. And he is going to fight. There's a scene where he's talking to Lang, and I don't remember exactly how it happened, but Lang has like gotten a report of these two Iorfs, and he's like, oh, that's probably Maquia, like, you need to go get your mom. And like, I liked this part. Ariel is just like, no, like, even if it is, I have this whole other life I've built. Like, I am loyal to you. I'm loyal to my comrades. I, need to fight for my wife and my child. And he's like, that is what I need to do right now. So he makes, a choice, like an interesting choice to me. He fights, like, there's some scenes where he, has a rifle and he's shooting people, and he does see Maquia. Their paths kind of cross, and they look at each other, and his buddy is like fighting and getting kind of overrun. So he basically just like leaves Maquia. He's like, no, like that is my responsibility right now, is like protecting my, brother in arms or whatever.
Yes.
Maquia runs the other way. It kind of culminates with Maquia, as she's running away, hears his wife in labor, so she helps deliver the baby, and it's like, this whole thing where like she's trying to give birth, and Maquia is there for her and all this stuff, and while Ariel is at the gates, like the front gates of the castle, as it's being charged by like a cavalry and all this stuff. So there's like all this...
it's very clear that the defending forces are just getting absolutely demolished. Like there's just like nothing left.
Yeah, and like that's why all this started with the Iorfs and everything, is like they were on the decline and they were trying to stop that. So like we're kind of seeing the culmination of their decline, like all these other countries that are invading and trying to take this shit down.
Right.
so it does kind of leave us on a little bit of a cliffhanger where it implies that Ariel dies. And I was like, okay, that's actually, I like that a lot because he made a decision. He decided, like, no, I have to fight for my country, my wife, my kid, my friends, all this stuff. And it cost him. So I was like, oh, okay, that's really great because I felt like in this movie, people weren't often making decisions that really led to much as far as like plot. That's undone. Ariel's fine. Maquia
No,
goes
yeah,
on.
and I think again this goes back to the thing for me. If I weren't emotionally invested in that relationship, I wouldn't have given a shit about the automatic revival immediately because that is what it is. It's an automatic revival. But like again, I with the ending of this movie, which we'll get to, I prefer that much more because that one hits it hits me in a way at the end, which I'll explain a little more when we get to it. That I think if it would happen that way here, where he just died in the battle, like I think it wouldn't have sat so well with me. I think it would have kind of just been like, okay, well, again, like I think, like you said, like if you're not getting the Maquia aerial thing, you would want that because that's really the focus you're looking for. If that kind of that interaction, but for me, it's I think it's better in the long run for it because, which we'll see here in a second, Maquia also makes a decision at that point in time.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, it kind of hard cuts to him waking up. Maquia is there with him. Um, they kind of have a conversation where she once again kind of reiterates how she feels that like she's failed as a mother, and Ariel tells her like no, like everything I am, and like there is a really good line where he's just like you taught me how to love, and so like they have this whole conversation where they're really telling each other finally because there was a whole bit like when we left them they
Yeah.
weren't in a good spot with each other.
And it was like an undisclosed like 7 or 8 years of time had passed, and it's like you kind of have to stomach that, and then it finally comes to pass there, and it's like yeah, they both know that, of course. I think that a really great message here for people is that you don't need to, and this is he really acknowledges her. It's like she's like you can call me whatever the fuck you want. Like if you don't think me I'm your mom, I'm not your mom. Call me Maquia. I don't care. I am what I am to you based on how you see me, and that's all that matters because I can't define that for you. And he's just very much like, no, you're my fucking mom. Like, absolutely, you're my mom. You're he loves her very much. And I think that's a great message for people to know, like, blood is not parenthood. Being related by blood does not mean you're a great parent. It's anybody can be as a parent would be to somebody else just by loving and taking care of them. And I think that's a really sweet message to put here at that point in time.
Yeah, yeah. And so after this like very kind of heartfelt conversation, Maquia basically is just like tells him like I love you so much and that's why I need to let you have your life. Like you need to be with your wife, you need to be with your kid, like I need to basically just like
Peace out.
yeah,
Because like
peace.
I think at that point I think she even kind of even says she's like I finally fucking understand. I've been so afraid of losing you and like focusing on that. She's just kind of like I still need to let you be you, and that's kind of the beauty of it is that I can still be, I can still say I've loved you and been there for you, but you're still you. And she's very much like I get it now. Even if I'm not here, your story will still go on, and I will always be part of that, even if I'm not physically here. Which again is a nice message.
Yeah. So she fucks off basically. She's like, I'll see you later. I think we did kind of skip over the whole thing where Krim does get into the palace. He basically meets up with Leilana, right?
Lelia.
Lelia, God, I cannot get that right. So sorry. He basically meets up with Lelia and is like, "Hey, I finally got you. Like, we can have our life together that we've always wanted." Because like this was nothing to us. This was a blip on the radar. Because yeah, it's been years, but we lived so long that none of this means anything. And she's like, "No, like I have a daughter that I need to see." she's like, this does mean something because like I have someone that I am responsible for and I want to see because I love them, even though I haven't seen them since they were born.
Right.
And Krim just like is like, okay, well, I'm gonna murder suicide us, I guess. So he just like throws a torch.
Not a great next step there, buddy. But all right.
Yeah, it's like, man, just like, I know there aren't many Iorfs left, but like, you could probably find somebody else to be with you.
Which I understand his frustration, where he's like, that fucking kid. I understand the frustration, but at the end of the day, it's not his like his call to make whether that kid's important to her or not. It's her call because she fucking birthed it. So he needs to fucking respect that.
Also, like it could have been both ways. Like she could have brought her kid and they could have gone together. You know what I mean? Like
he definitely seemed a lot more in the movie kind of like traditional to the purity of his race, so to speak, than a lot of the other characters with the IR4. He's very much like, fuck these disgusting humans. Like we are ourselves. Our lineage is Iorf lineage is a communal whole. And it's like, well, like you said, it can be both ways, buddy. Chill the fuck out. It's gonna be all right. Just get the fuck out. Like,
yeah. So after he does his whole thing, the captain of the guard that's popped up a few times shoots him, and there is a really kind of, I don't want to say pretty because it's like, gory and shit, but there is this really nice shot where like he basically crawls off and is laying next to this tree, and he's just pouring blood, and like his blood is kind of pouring into this little pool, and so like I don't know, I thought that was a really good shot.
Yeah, and it's right across from the last remaining Renato as well.
Yeah,
so it's kind of very symbolic, like hey, we're all dying. These last of this magic race is dying together here. Like we're not alone.
Yeah, and it's at this point Maquia has left her son, Ariel. She goes and we see her kind of find Krim, and she looks over towards the dragon, and that's kind of all we get. It cuts to the roof of the palace where the daughter of the prince, so I mean I guess the princess, is up there, and her caretaker, I don't know what you would call this person, is basically like, hey, we need to get out of here because this kingdom has fallen. You are the princess. It's not going to be good for you. Like, we need to go. And she's just like, I need to find my mom. Like, she's like, there's something like that. There's some kind of pushback. And Lelia comes out and is like, just like, oh my God, it's my daughter. This kid finally sees her mom, and she's like, oh my God, like it's my mom. She's so beautiful. Like she's radiant. Like I'm finally get to see her. And then kind of inexplicably, like, because she has been trying to get to her daughter this whole time, this whole movie, that has been her motivation. So she's just like, she hears the kind of the dialogue from the beginning of the movie, where she's like, oh, look at me, Maquia, I can fly. And she kind of is just like, oh, look, I can fly. And she runs and jumps off the roof. And she's like, oh, wow, I can fly. She then starts to plummet. But Maquia is on the dragon, and she like lands on the dragon, and they fly off into the sunset, basically. And there's this kind of voiceover where, Maquia is kind of at peace with her decisions. And she's like, I can't really domineer over Ariel anymore. I need to let him go because
and also we hear Lelia at this point. She's very much like, fucking kid, forget about me. I'm gonna forget about you. This was literally a speed bump. I was trapped in a tower for 12 years. Speed bump. Let's move forward.
And that was kind of, by the end of it, that was kind of my problem, where I like didn't really understand some of these character motivations and interactions, because her whole thing has been she wanted to get back to her daughter. She does it, and then she's like, oh, okay, I'm going to jump off the roof. And then she's like, okay, fuck you, kid. And the kid is weirdly okay with it. And it's just like, okay, see you, Mom. And I was like, wouldn't this crush her? Like,
I think this is another reason too for me. Like, I don't care about. I honestly, I was expecting coming into this, like, my criticism of the movie thus far would be to say that stuff is side stuff, is not really relevant. So just like, I would rather have not even seen Lelia's whole side story and just kept the focus back on Maquia and Ariel again. Like for me, that was my only like weak point in this was like, yeah, it's like, why would you just leave her then? Why not take her with you maybe and like start a life? I don't know. I agree. That was the only thing for me. I'm just kind of like, that's kind of the opposite of what you've been doing the whole time. But okay.
Yeah. And I think that could have also been an equally good solution to my problems with the movie, where if they didn't focus at all on any of the side stuff, and they just spent that time on Maquia. Because, like I said, the thing that didn't work for me in this movie was Maquia as a character. If they had put more work into that and giving her more kind of folds as a character, then that, I think, could have really made this work for me. So, yeah, I would have also liked to see that as well. Because, yeah, I liked all this other side stuff. But if the main thing had worked better for me, I could live without it. You know what I mean?
Right, and I think for me, where it did work for me, I'm just like, well, I'm happy, but I don't need the other stuff. You know what I mean? Where I think it's kind of literally like a glass half full, glass half empty kind of situation, where it's like, I'm happy with this. And you're like, well, I want more from this. And then that side stuff is kind of the missing link, right? So it's cool you say that, because I think that's really two good sides of storytelling. Is you need to know, I think it's a lot of it is subjective, of course, too, where you need to know like what's good enough for people and what's not enough for people. And I think that varies from person to person. Some people want like super like, how do I say this? Some people want like super in-depth like explorations in like of self. And when it's like, for me, I'm very happy with just kind of the emotional kind of back and forth turmoil for the Maquia area. I don't need to have the, crazy, like traumatic side of the tower. It's like, I'm happy with what I had. Like, I would rather just take away and like the extra stuff that's just distracting to me. You know what I mean? Whereas like some people like yourself, sounds like, want more of that, of the side stuff to bring it up.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's not even the I wanted more of the side stuff. Like I wanted more of that because Maquia didn't work, but I would have preferred for Maquia to work for me. And like, yeah, I think that's kind of my problem is, and that's just what I look for in stories, period, is, and that's kind of what I was getting at with like all this world building. I'm not as interested in that as like really diving into a character. Like that is what is interesting about storytelling to me, is like these cool characters that you can really dive into and see all these weird folds and just like all this stuff that even if it's contradictory, because like people are, so like that's kind of like that's all I'm trying to say, is like that's why it, like I said, it's not that it's bad, it's not that I didn't like it, it's just that that's what I wanted more of, because it was such a good concept, and what was frustrating to me was it was so close. You know what I mean? Like, if it's just bad or I just don't like it, that's one thing. But it was so close to me being like, wow, I love this. And that's why I was kind of frustrated and like, oh, God. Like, if that's just how I felt about it. It was just like, oh, God, it was so close for me. Does that make sense?
I think so, again, where it's like, for me, it was enough, and frankly, more than enough in the emotional aspects, which we'll get to in a second. Like, I really wasn't asking for much more. It had its effect on me in a way I was fully satisfied with. So again, coming into it and rewatching it recently, I was just kind of like, really, I was still really enjoying the main thoroughfare like I did the first time watching it. And I think, if anything, would have preferred less of the side stuff, more of the main stuff, which was Ariel and Maquia for me. But yeah. I do think this world in general is extremely interesting, and I would like to have seen some more content in general. I honestly wouldn't mind if this were a 3-hour movie at all, because I think that would really give a lot more emphasis on both aspects of that. But again, I think a lot of that is dictated by, I don't know, with contracts and trying to get story to fit in a certain amount of time, or how that works, or how that looks for the animation studios. But for me, like I said, it worked fine still. But we'll get to more of why it worked for me in a second. So I think really the only thing left in the movie is the after they fly off in the sunset, literally, the kind of end scene.
Yeah, and so this one worked for me a lot more than a lot of the other like kind of Maquia moments where she goes and it's kind of a misdirection in a way because at first you think, oh, this is Ariel's kid that
Yes.
it's just been a few years, but this kid looks at Maquia as she walks up and is like, who the fuck are you? And then the kid's mother is like, oh my god, like you're Maquia. And
Yeah.
she's like, yeah, I'm Ariel's mom. And it's revealed that this kid is actually Ariel's I don't remember if it's a grandson or granddaughter. And
Correct.
then this, person that she's talking to, this adult, was Ariel's daughter. And so Ariel's wife has died in the past few years. Ariel is now like a very old man. So she goes and kind of sits with him, and he's like very out of it. And he finally kind of looks at her and he's just like, Mom, like he recognizes her and he's just like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
he's like, she's literally just like the last time I saw her. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
it seems to be very comforting to him, to know like, okay, his mother's still doing well, and that she's there with him at the end.
Yeah, and basically, I think the entire dialogue is literally just Makia coming in saying, "I'm home," and then him just saying, "Mom, welcome home," which is just like it. It brings to mind in my heart all those small things my mom said like that, and like how like insignificant at the time they are, but like how important in the long run they've always like. So this movie really hit me emotionally because I'm so close to my mother, and I think that this end scene really kind of fucking drove a stake in me, because it's just like it's a weirdly beautiful thing to kind of just know, like, even though she wasn't there again, going back to what I said before, even though she wasn't there physically at some point, after some point in his life, which is we all have to go through more than likely, even though he's not there, she's not there physically for him, like, he's always kept her in his heart and loved her, and that is just such a like both saccharine sweet and terribly sad thing at the same. It's so bittersweet, and it's just, it really struck a chord with me emotionally, especially just kind of knowing my mother and my history and how close we've been and all the small moments we've shared. And this is kind of the point. I'm a fucking sucker for this shit. They kind of just play this big montage of all these mother, child interactions throughout their entire like time and life together, with like this big sweeping music, which, like I said, it's just hitting me hard.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, here at the end, I liked it more. You know what I mean? Than like some of the stuff leading up to it, because it does feel like when we see him, there's kind of the twist, and we see him as an old man, and she does finally kind of lose him, and we finally see that thing that she's been so afraid of, and we see that she's okay with it, and like we finally get that kind of character growth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That worked for
And
me.
it's like, yeah, and it's like she starts crying like she always promised him she never would. And she's like, I'm never going to cry over you ever again. Ever since she was a little kid, she told him that. And it's like, for her, it's like, well, I'm not crying out of sadness. I'm crying out of fucking happiness that I was able to give this person a beautiful life, and I was able to be in it for as long as I was, which is really the goal of any fucking mother. But it's just like, it's such a, it just, like I said, it hit me hard, hit me really hard at home on this. And like I said, the imagery of like every small thing a kid does, which I know I was a fucking weird, goofy kid, and the stupid shit I made my mom go through. Like, you just kind of see all those very playful moments, just like, again, shit that doesn't really fucking matter, or shit that doesn't have any significance at all. But like the entire time, is important. And I think for me, what worked was in the beginning, the fucking movie says to you, this is what's gonna fucking happen. You fucking know it. You're gonna lose a kid, whether it was in the war, whether it was at the end. This kid's gonna die, and you will have to watch that. And so it's like what it does for me in my brain is it made me preface every single small word interaction and just actual object. Like, this could be the last thing you say to them. Like, this could be it. And it's like every one of those is just ends up being so important at the end of the day for someone like me with, cares a lot about my mother. And it fucking ripped me apart. So one of the big reasons I wanted to show you this movie, because that's pretty much the culmination of the main plot there. One of the major things I wanted to show you about this, Matt, was that I fucking bawled my eyes out for 20 minutes at this scene. And that is not a joke. I was fucking crying, fucking rivers of tears at this point, because it just hit me in such a fucking way. And I teared up today even watching it again. Like, it is just like, the first time I watched this, I had to call my fucking mother and be like, I love you so fucking much. I wanted her to know that, because I do love her very much. And it just, family and friends and loved ones are just so important. Like, it's just such every small fucking thing you do. And like, you look at that in an overarching retrospect, like it does visually with the fucking like montage where it flashes things by real quick there. It just fucking melts me. And I just fucking die every time, because it's just, I don't know. I'm just so thankful for every fucking beautiful moment I've had with people on this earth and shared with people, because it really, really hit me in this movie with that, and it made me feel very happy and thankful for those moments. And again, I think that's why, like, going through this all with that in mind, it worked for me the whole time, because I'm just like, this is going to be on my mind the whole time. That is what I'm focused on emotionally at this point. And I, the entire time, saw that and had a catharsis of it at the end when he passes away. And it like I said, it fucking ripped me in half. And I that was the major reason, like, this one has always stuck with me, because it personally impacted me to the point of tears, which is hard for me to do in movies, because for me at least, emotional like effect is very difficult to do, because so much of our Hollywood movie scene is fucking fabricated and obvious. Like, this one genuinely awoken something in me as far as like tears, and that was something that is really special for me to have that kind of feeling from a movie,
Yeah. And, I do want to reiterate that, and I know I've told you this before, that like, I, feel like how you feel about media or a piece of media is kind of a horseshoe. Like, something that you really love is a lot closer to something that you really hate than something that's boring. You know what I mean? And it's not that I really hate this movie. It's, like I said, I was frustrated with it by the end. And that's because I think it was doing a lot of interesting things. Does that make sense? And like,
I think so.
Part of maybe why it didn't really click for me in the way that it clicked for you is that, I'm a cynical bastard. You know what I mean? Like, and like, I'm being serious, because like, when it ends with that, and like, yeah, I do think it worked more for me than some of the other stuff, but when it does kind of end with this very kind of life affirming answer of her, like, it was worth it because it brought me joy to love him. To me, I almost would have preferred if it ended on a much quieter moment where she's trying to, like, it doesn't tell you that it was worth it to her. Like, was the pain worth the joy? And like, to me, I would have enjoyed that more if it left the question and it made you think, like, in that way of like, oh, is it worth it? You know what I mean? It's like that. Honestly, that's part of it. It's just like, I'm a cynical bastard, and the stuff that I enjoy tends to be super fucking depressing. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's that simple.
Well, and that's something too, going into this, I did anticipate as far as like how, because here's the thing, right? I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I do. And I'm very vocal about that. I was curious going into this, knowing you as long as I've known you, like if this, because at times it can be saccharine sweet, kind of almost.
Yeah.
If that stuff would have an effect on you in the same way it did me, because I've never heard you kind of voice media about this kind of like very emotionally like I don't want to say like very saccharine sweet topic where it's like, oh, emotions and love and all this. Like I've never heard you like vocalize that. So I was like, I wonder how he's going to take this, because this was one of my expectations was he's not going to like, not they don't see it, but like he's not going to find as much value in that as I did. And I think that's what has happened here from what I can tell. Not that it's like you don't see the value in the love, but it's just like you want more than just saying it's you want more and more and more to say like, hey, show me these complexities of it, as opposed to saying like, this is just innately the emotion. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's completely fair, because like I said, the stuff that I love tends to be, I mean, frankly, painful. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And like that was here, and I think that's why I really, really wanted to just love it, and I just never quite could, because
Sure.
like I said, in the end, it is very life affirming, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like that is great. You know what I mean? And like I'm genuinely, I'm not trying to be a smartass when I say this, but like I'm very happy that like it had that effect on you, and like I think that's great. And frankly, I kind of wish I could be that way. You know what I mean? And maybe one day I will, be able to just be more excited about that kind of thing. But if I'm honest with myself, the stuff that I love is painful, and that was there, and like it could have gone that way, and that
You wanted it to be more the center point than the saccharine sweet stuff.
yeah, and like that's probably part of why I felt the way I did, because like, yeah, I can point out all of these kind of mechanical things that I felt like, oh, well, that could have been this, and maybe that didn't quite work. But at the end of the day, that's a big part of it, probably the fact that like it didn't dwell on the pain of what it must be like to be in her position, and it instead went the direction of, but it is worth it because she felt all this joy as well. So
yeah, I see that.
Yeah, so like all I'm saying is like I don't think that's a fault of the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm just a cynical bastard.
No, that's the thing though, right? That's why I wanted to kind of share this with you, because again, the fucking point of this podcast is showing you shit you probably wouldn't consume, and there is definitely none of that like you said, very cynical shit in this, where it's like, I mean, there's touches of it, of course, like with some of the violence and some of the war, but like a lot of it is just like, damn. It's hard to the human experience is fucking hard, but at the end of the fucking day, it's fucking worth it because people love you. And that's why I've always lived my whole life, and kind of one of my main mantras, And so to put it into a movie and then also say, this is your mom. I'm like, oh, fuck, you got me on both accounts now. I'm going to fucking cry. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. But no, I mean, at the end of the day, your opinion is absolutely, valid to have. If it's something, if there's things that didn't work for you, it didn't work for you. That's fucking fine. The whole point of going over this, like, it's interesting to hear how you process this stuff versus me, because at the end of the day, like, yeah, this is important to me, and I wanted to share that with you, but doesn't mean it has to be 100% important to you, and that's fucking fine.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason for this podcast, is trying to at least understand, like, hey, this is why I love this, and I just want to share it. If you don't fucking feel the same way, that's fine, but at least I got to share it with you, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I was basically about to say the same thing, where not only that, but like the conversation kind of helped inform me about maybe why I felt some of the way that I did. And if I ever rewatch this, like with the context that you've given me about why it worked for you, I might enjoy it more. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So like,
yeah.
Like I said, I hope it's come through in the conversation. It's not that I thought it was bad or anything like that, But it just some of it just didn't quite work for me.
Let me put it this way: would you say it was like almost like a home run for you, but missing a few components?
Yeah, like it's definitely one of those things that as I watched it, I was like, I definitely understand why and how some people would really love it. You know what I mean? Like I could
Yeah.
see this being something that people just adore. But like I said, it's just some of the mechanical stuff, and like I said, I can say that all I want, but at the end of the day, it's an emotional response. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I can
Yeah.
try and be like, oh well, I have this creative writing background and I'm gonna analyze it, but like at the end of the day, it really is an emotional response. And yeah, I think that is definitely just a big part of it, is like the things and the emotions that I tend to explore with the things I consume or the things I write are just very different. You know what I mean?
Sure. And I could definitely see why if that's something you're looking more, not even not that you need to have that explicitly, but if you're used to the kind of more of that style of character development and storytelling, because like obviously this doesn't go into like, yeah, like all these tragic scenes. Like there's not a lot of that, but like you don't get as much characters development per se. But for me, the emotional rawness was just enough to carry me. But I definitely understand with that in mind, like why you might be happy about some of these things when you're looking for some of the values you really love from other media. So completely valid opinion. Yeah, like you said, at the end of the day, I fucking bawled tears into my wife's shoulder for fucking way too long.
Yeah.
But again, it's like I wear that shit on my sleeve. I'm happy to say it. But fun side note on this too, like I was at a party actually a few weeks ago with some people here in town, and the anime came up, and I was like, "Has anybody here seen Maquia?" And then one guy went, "Oh my god, you've seen Maquia?" And I went, "Yeah, have you fucking seen it?" And he went, "Yeah, dude." I was like, "Dude, I fucking cried my eyes." He went, "Dude, me too." And we got like super fucking excited. We're like, "Holy shit, we're crying." um, and then one guy went, "You guys cried," and I was like, "Yeah, fuck you."
Man,
We fucking cried for hours.
my toxic trait is that whenever somebody is being like toxically masculine, my
Oh god.
response is to be toxically masculine in a different way. So when somebody's like, "Oh, you cried in a movie," my response is like, "Sorry, you're such a pussy that you can't cry in a movie," like, which is not a good response.
But a valid one. But a valid one. And in that case, we tell you, yeah, that guy's a pussy. So yeah, you're right.
But and like, yeah, I get that that's not the best way to put it or whatever. But I mean,
No,
it's
man.
true. Like those people that are like that, and especially men. Like, it's just kind of sad that like, okay, like yeah, it didn't make me cry, but I'm not gonna like judge anyone that it did. And there's other shit
No,
that's made
no,
me
yeah.
cry. I to this fucking day cannot watch. There are two scenes from Star Wars. I cannot watch the final fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan when he's like, "I have failed you, Anakin." I fucking cry at that part. And then when Anakin like turns back and he like tells Luke, he's like, "Tell your sister you were right about me." I fucking cry at that part every time. So like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like just cuz this one didn't make me do it, like there's other shit that does.
Oh, sure. And that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a big. I think it's important to kind of identify, like, when you come forth and say, I didn't like X, Y, and Z, like, no, that's valid. That's completely valid. But, like, when someone comes forth and says, you're a fucking pussy to actually enjoy X, Y, Z, that's when you say, all right, man, calm the fuck down. Put your big britches on. It's okay to cry. Men are allowed to cry at whatever media makes them cry. My first movie I ever cried in was Castaway with Tom Hanks, believe it or fucking not. When I was a kid, I swear to God, when I was a kid and he fucking lost Wilson, spoiler, he loses Wilson in the ocean. It's fucking traumatizing for me. And that fucking volleyball is just floating away with a smile on his face. And Tom Hanks is just like, Wilson! Just like screaming for this fucking volleyball. I'm like, that poor volleyball, he's going to be all alone. And I'm crying as a child. And I'm just like, so believe me, like, I remember these things that make me cry. Yes, volleyballs and my mother, those two things make me cry.
Man, if your mom ever plays volleyball, you're gonna be fucking destroyed.
Fuck it, I'm gonna have to get some antidepressants at that point.
Start fucking snorting Zoloft. Freebasing that shit. But no, I will say that, like, after this conversation and after some of that context, I would be interested in rewatching it. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, so like, I think that even just talking about it in this way, I'd be like, oh, okay, like let's give it another chance and maybe see if stuff lands a little different with some of that context, even if the context is just how it made you feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think my default going into movies is that. And so it's like, I definitely don't. I think you're a lot more, and this is not a criticism, you're a lot more critical, especially with your background of like actually looking at character development and plot and like analyzing the pieces of the narrative. Whereas for me, it's like, oh shit, this is gonna make me cry, isn't it? And that's all I have to think about. Like, I'm just like, fuck it. Like, I'm gonna cry. Fucking watch out.
Man, I was I was listening to the episode we did on Harlan County, USA while I was editing it. Spoiler, I just fucking put that out. So whenever you're hearing this, know that like I'm so far behind in editing. But anyway, there was
don't tell people. Don't tell people.
There was this part when you're like explaining the difference between bluegrass and like modern pop country. And I go on this fucking tirade about how country is a psyop made by the capitalists to sell Southerners a culture that consists entirely of buying Ford F-150s. And I was like, holy shit, I am insufferable. Why does anyone talk to me?
Full disclosure, I'm going to a Post Malone concert in October. He has jokingly called his tour the F1 Trillion Tour, so thumbs up, Posty. But no, it's funny because I think you definitely have a lot more of a rigid skill set than I do when it comes to like picking things apart as far as the story stuff goes. I definitely have never done that. As far as it's not something I really enjoy to do, honestly. From my side, I'm very much like slap it on, let's see it go, and let's see if I enjoy it or not. And that's basically all I do. I don't really do plot analysis or character development. But you're also, a writer. You've done that shit where it's like you definitely have a different eye than I do for stuff like that. In addition, again, we just have different personalities. Like I said, we're just different people, and we're going to look at shit differently, right? So, yeah, no, like I said, your opinions are completely valid. I'm not discrediting those. I never try to. I'm just saying, for me, like the way I consume this hit me. I'm interested that you're considering rewatching with that in mind, because it makes you think, right? How much of movies is the mindset you have going into it, as opposed to the movie itself sometimes? I don't really know. That's kind of a more philosophical discussion, or that's true of any media, really. But, I mean, kind of like, God, for fuck's sake, this is off topic, but, like, we went into Sea of Thieves, right? And we were looking into it, and we were like, oh, this is going to be XYZ. And we went into it, and it was ABC. And we both went, fuck this.
Yeah. And that was something I was trying to be mindful of, because I definitely... And I'm sure a lot of people are like this, but I definitely, like, once I kind of start to form an opinion, once I start to form an opinion, I can easily become entrenched in that. So as I was watching this, and as stuff started to kind of not work for me or rub me wrong, I started to, like, be more critical and be like, oh, well, I don't like this because of that. And I had to tell myself, like, no, you need to just, like, accept this as it is, and go in with good faith. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I do think that like the mindset that you're bringing in is a big part of it.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, you may watch this again with a different mindset, and you may fucking hate it more, or not even that you hate it, but you may find it even less enjoyable than the first time, and that's fine too. It's just like you said, at the end of the day, the emotional response that I'm so passionate about this movie is my emotional response. That is not
Yeah.
going to hold true for everybody, and
Yeah.
that's fucking fine.
I will say, I could have done without the part when he's like, "Why don't you give me a kiss?" I was like, I see what they're doing here. They could have done this in another way.
I don't know what you're talking about. Doesn't your mom talk to you that way?
No, that was how he was talking to his mom.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You know what I'm talking about when he's like coming home drunk.
That was a failed attempt at a joke.
Oh, okay. No, but yeah, when he's coming home drunk, I was like, you know what? Could have done without that Maquia.
No, that was a little ick. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's supposed to be, right? But still,
Oh yeah, no. Like I said, that's not even like I said. I definitely see what they're going for, but I just was like, I was so tense, and like that might just be a success. You know what I mean? But I was so tense as that scene played out. I was like, oh my god, don't do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess the one thing we didn't touch on at the very end, she does at the very end of all that, after having that moment and moving on after Ariel's passed, she kind of actually, it looks like she's kind of hanging out and traveling with the I'll call him the medicine seller man, and he's just kind of like, yep. I think the very last line of the movie is he says to her, he goes, all right, time to hop on the cart, let's go, time to meet the next person you have to lose, which is, again, a very pessimistic view, but also like it's almost framed in this kind of like beautiful, like, all right, well, who's next on the fucking impact list for life, which is kind of like, again, tragically hopeful, which is, again, just a very emotional response for me as well. But no, yeah, I think that's really the end of the movie then, right? I don't think anything even else. That is something else too. I forgot to mention it earlier on in the movie. That same guy, that vendor, that medicine man or whatever his name is, he actually says, humans are good for 4 things. They will stare at you, they will taunt you, then they'll hate you, then they'll kill you. Which I'm like, damn, spitting truth, bud. Like, that's fucked up, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, really. There was a like little scene after the credits where it's very brief. It just shows the Iorfs kind of going back to their village, like the ones that are still alive, and they have the dragon with them. So it's kind of ending on
Sweet.
kind of a hopeful note where it's like, oh, okay, maybe they can rebuild. Maybe this magic doesn't have to leave the world.
Right, and it maybe leave the world. This means lives in peace away from the humans.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, I think I've made it clear how I felt about it. I thought that it was good. I thought it was doing a lot of interesting things. Some of it didn't quite work for me, but I am curious to see if I ever rewatch it, which I feel like I will. I'm gonna have to find an excuse to rewatch it though.
Yeah, I get that.
But yeah, I might rewatch it one day and see if I feel any differently based on kind of the conversation we've had. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about this movie?
Honestly, no. I think we covered all the bases. Thank you for listening to it and listening to my rant about how I cried. And yeah, I think I think visually it's a beautiful movie. I think the voice acting was done really well in this movie. Animation was excellent in this movie. But yeah, like I said, I think we discussed pretty much everything as far as content. So yeah, thanks again for watching it and being honest with your opinions.
Yeah. No, hey, like I said, thanks for showing it to me because at the very least, I thought it was very interesting. Like the ideas it was messing around with and what it was doing with them was very interesting. And like I said, if it had been boring, that's what I would have been like, fuck this. You know what I mean? It definitely.
Yeah, I get that.
So like I think that in itself is a testament to its quality. Is that if there are people that come away from it being like, it's probably at least doing something interesting.
Yeah.
But no, so last night I've been giving you options at the end of every episode. Last night I told you just 2 years. It was 1922 and 1979. I told you like, come prepared to tell me what you think those are and to make a decision, and then I will tell you if you were correct.
I'm going to assume these are both horror.
Okay. Do you have like any guesses what they might be or anything like that?
I'm going to assume the 1922 one is some kind of off, from what I understand, this very specific kind of like introductory German horror-esque films. Not knowing much about that, that's my extent. 1979, I'm going to assume is a pretty titular film in the horror genre. I don't know if that's as far back for The Wicker Man. I think The Wicker Man was probably earlier than that, but I'm not 100% sure. Other than that, I don't know what else it could be for the 70s one.
Yeah.
Unless it's Predator. Is that a 7? No, that's the 80s. I don't know. So, I'm expecting that I need to make a choice here, yes?
Yeah, so and like I said, I'm not going to confirm or deny anything. I will just say, make your choice, and I will let you know how right you were.
Let's do... Let's do the 20s.
Okay, so yeah, you were dead on because it is an early German horror movie. I want you to watch Nosferatu.
Oh, I was going to say Nosferatu. I didn't know that was the 20s.
Yeah, it was 22.
Really? Oh my god, I thought Nosferatu was like the 40s or 50s. I didn't know that. Interesting.
No, yeah, it's old as shit.
Nosferatu is like a big horror. I didn't realize that was that. Wow, okay.
Yeah, so the reason, and the other one, I'll go ahead and tell you, it's definitely still on the table for you watching eventually. The other one was Alien.
I was on the other end of the spectrum. I was going to say Alien, but I was like, it's Predator, right? I don't know.
And the reason that I love both of these movies. The reason that I chose these two was they're both kind of going to be in the zeitgeist because there's a new Alien movie coming out pretty soon, and then there's the remake of Nosferatu coming out in December.
Oh, excellent. Maybe we can have a follow-up episode just we watch it individually and review them.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about. And not to like spoil anything, but I will go ahead and tell you, since you chose Nosferatu, there has been another remake. They remake this movie every 50 years, apparently, because in the 70s, another German director made a remake of Nosferatu. What German director do we love at this podcast?
Is it Werner Herzog?
It is Werner Herzog.
Very good. This makes me happy.
So we might end up watching that one as well.
Hell yeah.
But yeah,
awesome.
I will go ahead and I will find a link for you because there are a lot of different versions of this movie with different scores and things like that. I will get into, in the episode, I'll get into why that is, but I will find and pick the one that I think is kind of the best introduction or just the best all around. There is one version I'm definitely not going to show you, but it's pretty rad. Somebody took this movie and created a score that was wholly songs by Typo Negative, which is this 90s goth metal band, and it works surprisingly well. Like, it's actually kind of perfect.
Well, hell yeah. No, the only interaction I've ever had with Nosferatu was the fucking episode of SpongeBob: The Graveyard Shift, where they go Nosferatu, and he just smiles at the camera.
He just flicks the light on and off.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I don't know what that is. I'm 7 years old. What the fuck is Nosferatu? Also, what the fuck, SpongeBob making a fucking referential joke to Nosferatu? This just cements to me that SpongeBob is just the top tier quality for any kid's show, and it always will be up until the new shit, of course. But when we were kids, man, SpongeBob fucking rocked.
Yeah, that show was wild as hell. Like, some of the ideas that they had, I don't understand how they came up with it, and then they were like, yeah, let's just put that on Nickelodeon. And the funny thing is, like, yeah, we didn't get the reference, but we were just like, oh, creepy guy, ha ha ha.
Yeah, now I know who Nosferatu is because of fucking SpongeBob.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. It's going to be fun. I'll get that over to you soon.
Awesome. I guess anything else here we need to discuss either about Nosferatu or Maquia before we adjourn for the week?
No, I think we are good. If anybody out there is listening and wants to get a hold of us for anything, it is bestfriendsdissimilarinterests@gmail.com.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for listening to 2 hours and 20-ish minutes of this episode. Wherever you are, have a great week, day, year, month, hour. Love yourselves, love each other, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks again, Tiberi, and thanks to everyone else. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks, Matt. Love you guys.